I have a little bit of follow-up.
I saw that. I added a couple of notes there too.
I saw those. The first bit was like a comment I heard somebody else make, but I feel like it's worth repeating, and I feel like they're right. But it was like, I'm pretty sure every implementation of space gray that Apple has defined as a color of their devices is a slightly different shade.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure every year there are slight tweaks to all of the colors, even if they look very similar without putting them side by side. So that wouldn't surprise me at all.
I miss black.
I sort of do and I sort of don't. Like I do like the dark gray when it's not. I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Like the 10 and 10S, that dark gray, I liked.
I believe it was called space gray.
It was. But I do miss the just really deep black that they've done. God, which phone was that?
The iPhone 7 came in black and jet black, and I loved that.
That may be the one I'm thinking of. I went with black for that iteration, not the jet black, because I wasn't real sure about the shininess.
Yeah, the people that have where grippiness is like something that they require love the jet black. I went with just the black, which was a matte finish, and I loved it. I think that was one of my favorites.
I think that's the one that I specifically referenced as the Batman phone
as
well.
Yes, you did.
What was the follow-up about knowing that I'd remember Anonymous?
Oh, I just had mentioned, I was like, when talking about the Q documentary, I asked you if you remembered Anonymous, and you're like, yes. And I knew you would remember Anonymous. I don't know why I phrased it that way.
Okay. I added a couple of quick little blurbs there. One, did you ever watch the We Are Legion documentary that came out in 2012?
I think I have it in Plex, but I don't think I've watched it yet. I know I haven't watched it yet, but I think I have it.
Well, I know I for sure have it, so you should have access to it either way. It was pretty good. It missed the mark on a couple of things if you go back to the origins of the movement, but overall it was a really good documentary. And then the other thing that I put in there was back when I did one of my papers during my time with them doing my master's, it was on whether or not the hacking subculture could be explained at all, really, or in any general capacity under within the framework of self-control theory. So I added a link to that article just because, even though I didn't call out Anonymous, that was one of the kind of driving factors in exploring that.
That's pretty cool.
And then I saw you also added some notes from episode 41 when we were delving further into racism. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that was from a bit ago. There was a couple of in there. I listed some personal instances where I was harassed because I was viewed as a person of color, and I've since been thinking about am I a person of color or am I a white person? It doesn't really matter, but it's a friend of mine's that he just commented and said, "You're too brown to be white and too white to be brown." I was like, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, it's something that definitely doesn't come to mind for me. I am about as white as you can get from a ancestry perspective and general appearance perspective. I guess technically my skin's a little bit darker thanks to some coloration from Native American lineage as well, but not enough to look anything other than white for sure.
Yeah, I feel like most of the time I am white passing, but sometimes I have definitely felt that I've been a person of color passing in a positive way. And then the the instances I believe the instances I forgot to mention were on more than one occasion. I've had the police called on me. Once was I drove up to a park on a nice autumn day, and I was sitting in my car reading while my kids were in preschool. And police showed up and said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I was like, "I'm enjoying this autumn day." And they said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Enjoying this autumn day." And they said, "Do you have anything to be doing?" I was like, "No." And they were actually kind about it. They weren't. I wouldn't say harassing. They weren't harassing. They were just like wanted to know what's going on. And they said, "Well, we've gotten a complaint about you being here." And I'm like, Am I breaking any laws?" And they said, "No." I was like, "Am I free to be here?" And they said, "Yes." I said, "Do I need to leave?" And they said, "No." I said, "Would it make your life easier if I left?" And I think at some point I said to them, I was here, my kids were in preschool down the road, and I was just enjoying the day, waiting for them to be done, because it's a half-day thing. And they said, I just remember said, "Would it be easier if I left?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I'll make your day easier. No worries." And they were like, "Yeah." And they were very kind. But like that's happened to me a couple of times where police have been called on me for no, it's. I feel looking back, I'm like, oh, they saw me as a suspicious person, even though I wasn't doing. There was, which doesn't exist. It's only suspicious activity that exists, but that's why they called the police on me.
It's interesting on two different levels. One, like it's ridiculous that any person could not engage in an activity that is not suspicious and still have law enforcement called, right? I mean, that in and of itself is wrong on every level.
Yep.
What I find interesting about it, though, is I wonder how much of it could be attributed to some level of concern about a suspicious in appearance person, or however you want to phrase it. I don't have a good phrase for it either. But how much of it was related to what was perceived as related to being seen as a potentially as a person of color in a particular environment, and how much of it is a hypersensitivity to not normally seeing a adult male outside of or near like preschool or school campuses in certain situations and scenarios,
That's what I initially thought. I thought it had more to do with being a male than not. But the first time that it happened to me, I was at the Walmart. I'd gone to the Walmart on Lakeshore Drive, and it doesn't matter because you don't know where anything in Birmingham is on purpose. So,
I actually do at least know where Lakeshore is, unfortunately.
Right. So I had shopped there and left and had received a phone call, and I took that phone call, and it was a nice evening. So I remember just standing outside my vehicle and sitting, and then at some point sitting in my vehicle. I don't know, it was a 30-minute phone call, but security came and said that I had to leave, and that because there were complaints about me being there. I was like, I've just been on my phone. And that's a thing where it was like, this is private property, and they do have the right to ask me to leave. So I'm not going to make a scene. I'm not going to tell them like I didn't have any rights there, to be honest. And it's not worth fighting. So that's a case where it's like, it was definitely not because I was a male, or just because I was a male.
Yeah, that one I would also be curious if there was a loitering component, depending on things that might have been going on in the area over the past 3 or 6 months or something like that.
Could have been.
And the only reason I would even think that is because I know Lakeshore well enough to know that there are periods of time where that is an issue.
Yeah.
And so I could see that potentially being a rationale for it. Now again, it sounds like I'm trying to create rationales for things that should not be an issue anyway. I'm just trying to be that devil's advocate voice for there are always things that we don't necessarily know about a situation as well.
I think
I do think though that you were probably focused on because of a mismatch of skin tone.
Yeah. I was gonna say I would have chalked that one up to just being a man, other than somebody said they were concerned that I was there. So it wasn't, if the security person said, "Hey, you can't stay here," that would have been fine. I wouldn't have thought anything of it. That makes sense, especially the area and so forth. But because I said somebody had complained about me, that made me think, oh, maybe not. So,
yeah, that little nuance is why I would also tend to side with you were probably focused on for appearance and not anything actually of substance.
Yeah. So I think these last two bits were after show bits. I'm not sure.
They were, but okay. I thought I would tease the first one.
All right.
In episode 49, we had an after show, and I mentioned some stuff about my ankle, and I will explain that in this episode's after show.
I hope it's good news.
I'm circling back to that.
Don't say yet, but I hope it's good news.
All right. The other, I'll go ahead and just mention. So in episode 54 in the after show, I made a comment about having a spare Apple Watch, and I mistakenly said it was a Series 5. It's not. It's a Series 4. Just clarification. Doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it is still available to you to try Fitness Plus whenever you would like.
After we're done recording, we can work out the details.
Sounds good. So with that rounds out the follow-up, and we've got a primary topic and then a bunch of little ancillary things that kind of feed off of that primary topic. I will leave it to you how you would like to go kind of through these, because I don't know exactly what you wanted to go into with the primary topic, and I think it's kind of free-flowing from there.
I think I wanted to. I was thinking we'd hit on the micro topics first, and then save the bulk of the show for this main topic.
That works for me. And honestly,
I don't think it matters.
Like at this point, I could sum up all of the micro topics with I can't comprehend the stupidity of people that we have been exposed to over the past year and a half, and it just gets worse every week or two.
It does, and I'll just put this out there for the. I'll just start with this one micro topic I had and let you talk about your three. But a friend of mine posted this article about. It's a new conspiracy theory. So,
can I interject one quick statement real quick?
Yeah.
When I read this, I unfortunately was not surprised.
No. I'll get into this. I'm not going to go into detail about exactly what it is. I think that just the title of the article is enough to talk about what I want to talk about. I didn't read the article. I didn't need to read the article. But the article title is The New Anti-Vax Conspiracy Theory. It is the left is causing unvaccinated death on purpose through reverse psychology. Now, I first heard about this, and I wouldn't have called it a conspiracy theory. It was just like somebody spouting off, a friend of a friend. And she blamed her contraction of COVID-19 on vaccinated people. She said, vaccinated people have gotten me sick with COVID-19. And it's just like, you want to put a gun to your head and blow your brains out by how stupid people are being. So where I saw my friend posted this article about this conspiracy theory, I commented and I said, I heard it from a horse's mouth before seeing this article. A friend of a friend blamed her development of COVID-19 on vaccinated people. She spouted out some other theories along with this one, but I won't digress. It wasn't dangerous to normal. If it wasn't dangerous to normal folks, I'd really like it if they stayed unvaccinated. It'd be interesting to see how it all played out that way. But I felt it was apropos. It was relevant to use the the turn of phrase straight from the horse's mouth, or a variation of straight from the horse's mouth, because so many people are using ivermectin to try to cure COVID-19.
Yeah, my head hurts trying to understand what kind of mental space you have to be in to believe that people who are proponents of vaccination and talking about how safe and effective it is and trying to encourage those around them to protect themselves and others. How do you take that and manage to convince yourself that it is really people who are doing exactly what they are being proponents of, trying to get you to not do the same thing they have done? And it's worse than trying to follow like a Cliff Notes version of Inception.
Yeah.
It's baffling on so many levels.
So I will digress right now. The other bits she was spouting out was that she and a number of people from her church got sick with COVID-19. It was maybe close to a dozen people. And her comment was that the enemy was attacking the church. And I'm not a religious person, but I immediately thought of the book of Habakkuk. He's one of the minor prophets in the Old Testament. And there's this phrase, there's this in the first chapter, the whole book is a conversation between the prophet Habakkuk and God, and how God is telling Habakkuk that he's doing something that he won't believe. And that is, he is making the Chaldeans, the pagan people in a neighboring area, strong and mighty, so that they can take the Israelites into captivity as a form of punishment to the Israelites. So there's this whole thing where it's just like, hey, I'm raising up your enemy to take you into captivity and to make your life hard. So it made me think when she said the enemy is attacking it, I was just like, how do you know it's not Jesus giving you COVID-19? There's certainly an instance where that is plausible.
Yeah, so quick side, I guess, digression, sidebar, maybe is a better way to think of it. There are a multitude of examples where you can phrase or debate or argue or whatever kind of phrasing you want to use for a somewhat argumentative conversation about what actions can be attributed to, and we'll focus on Christianity since that's kind of where the conversation lies. What actions could be attributed to God's will versus Satan's influence versus the general free will concept of letting things play out within a space, in this case being the environment that we know as Earth. And people don't like to understand those nuances. They like to focus on the overall idea that everything God does is benevolent and in purpose of creating a better life and environment for you before you reach that afterlife point. And that's just not true. You take any person who has studied the Bible or who pastors from a standpoint of actually learning and understanding everything that is presented within the Bible, even going back to the original text, trying to understand where differences in meaning from translation come from. Every single one of them would tell you there are plenty of stories of suffering or being patient for a prolonged period of time in a less than ideal state as a method of learning or understanding or changing that individual perception. And we could do a whole episode on, we could actually probably do multiple on different religious beliefs and everything else. But the big thing to kind of harp on here is that nowhere, and literally nowhere in the Bible does it say that you will live a life of peacefulness and lack of suffering and everything will be great if you simply believe in and follow God.
You're right.
That doesn't exist.
No, it does not. It actually says quite the opposite.
Yes.
It says that the way is hard. So there's that.
And it goes hand in hand with, I know I've mentioned it before, but it goes hand in hand with the thought of those people who say, well, I'm just going to put it in God's hands and pray or, believe that he'll see me through. That's not the way things work.
Right. We kind of talked about that on a few shows ago.
The example was
episode 50.
Yeah, the example was the parable of, guys stuck on his roof and, flooding, and somebody comes by in a boat, a helicopter, whatever. There's like 4 or 5 different people that come by, and the guy continues to say, no, I'm going to, put my faith in God's hands to deliver me from this. And he ends up dying and meets God and asks why he didn't save him. He said, well, I sent you 4 different ways to get out of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just, it makes it really difficult to accept a lot of people from a, this is why I do or don't believe something perspective. So it takes a lot to take a lot of different people's philosophical outlooks or perspectives on things when they don't understand that nuance.
I believe the word.
I think the other example was the whole, you're not going to jump out of a airplane without a parachute.
Right.
I know I have so much I want to rant on there, but that's going to completely derail the evening. You've started to say something a couple of times.
The word that comes to mind is confound. Like, I'm completely confounded. Like dumbfounded, confounded. Ugh.
Like it feeds in well to one of the other things that I listed. So it's kind of a grim headline. The headline was, there were more deaths than births in Alabama last year, and it's a first for the state. I think in the article they said there was a period in the early 1900s that it might have been similar, but I don't have a note there. But for 2020, there were approximately 64,714 total deaths and 57,641 births. And the numbers are preliminary at this point. They confirm them over the course of the year. The thing that I find interesting about that headline, and the reason it feeds from the previous topic, is that Alabama is a perfect illustration of conflating incorrect perspectives on religious beliefs with a lack of action or a different choice of action than what should actually be pursued. And what I mean by that is, I know one of the other things that has been a kind of in the background noise level, call it a conspiracy theory, call it just a warped perception, but that's the vaccine is somehow or another equated with the quote-unquote mark of the beast. Have you heard that particular argument?
Yes.
Okay. I can't even wrap my hand around that one. I mean, it's such bullshit and
Well,
that's the nicest way to say it.
well, Christians have a big hard-on for end times. Like that's like way more interesting than living a day-to-day life. It'd be way more interesting to be a Christian in the end times.
I mean, you can make that argument, sure, but I don't think it's even that. I think it's this rhetoric around placing faith in faith instead of attempting to place any level of trust in science.
Well, and for the past 20, 30 years, there's been this like anti-intellectualism movement pitting religion against science and education. And it's a garbage movement. That's where the idea of intelligent design has come from. It's absurd.
I'm glad you phrased it that way. Go ahead.
I was going to say, because like if right now you took every single Bible in the world and destroyed it and it was gone, and you took every single science book and destroyed them and they were gone, the science books would be recreated. You could redo those experiments. You could relearn those things, but you don't recreate the Bible. You don't have that anymore. It'll be gone. Any work. I mean, that goes for any work of fiction. And what's really disconcerting is that you have a lot of folks that are religious and they're anti-vaccination, and they somehow believe it is an infringement upon their rights. But if you ask them, who are you more loyal to, your religion or your country, they will say, my religion. And at the crux of their religion, like the thing that makes Christianity, is a sacrifice for the good of all of God's creation. And they're not.
Yeah,
they're not
the people
willing
that argue that,
and they are not. They are not willing to make that sacrifice.
Yeah. So I want to back up slightly. Two overall disclaimers. One, a belief in a faith is not mutually exclusive with a trust in science and understanding, and vice versa, right? You can absolutely be a religious person and someone who understands and accepts science for what it is.
Absolutely.
The problem is that the vast majority of people want to cite religious influences or thoughts or perspectives because it's a way to take a personal thought or belief or opinion and have it more or less not refutable. Because if you use the excuse that it's based on your religious perspective, it tends to stop the argument, because not enough people are versed enough in what it means to be a person of faith and what it means to accept the body of knowledge that we've created in science. And I'm going to overly simplify it, but in a nutshell, being a person of faith is simply trying to do better for those around you. And being a acceptor of knowledge and science is to be able to look at what it means to do better for those around you through the lens of what we have experienced and understand, with the understanding as well that what we know and experience and understand is fluid and changes and can be tweaked, often quickly, often not quickly. They go hand in hand. Where it breaks down is that too many people look at people of science as followers of logic, and if I can't see it and prove it, then it obviously does not exist. But that's misguided, because to be someone who is invested in understanding those things around you, you have to start with an unknown. and then you try to explain it to the best of your ability, and either you find proof for it or you don't, but that just further fuels repetitive inquiries into an explanation. It doesn't mean it has to explain this thing. You just want to see if you can find a way to explain it. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where I have a big problem with it is when people look at the science or have the ability to look at the science and to even follow the thought processes and say, yeah, that doesn't work for me because I believe this. Well, I'm sorry. Just because you believe something doesn't make it true. The scientific method exists to recreate results.
Mm-hmm.
If you can recreate results, you have some level of explanation. It may not be perfect by any means, but it at least guides you to something that is consistently true. If you don't want to believe it, well, then that's just you rejecting repeatable steps to bring you to a conclusion that makes you wrong. Period.
Yeah.
Like, I can't overstate that. Just because you believe something else to be true does not change what is true in a repetitive fashion.
Yeah. Like I said, if you destroy all the science books, they can be recreated.
Yeah, I think the main reason I wanted to walk it back and walk through or talk through it is just because work of fiction might be debatable.
Oh, I'm very.
I know.
I'm very.
And
I make polarizing.
And I have no
comments.
problem with it.
I make polarizing comments like that. So
I have no problem with it. There's a lot that we take as a. Let's clarify. The Bible is a collection of stories. That does not mean that every single statement literally taken from it is true. It is a collection of stories written by men. There will be some things that are inaccurate. To what level of accuracy, that is up for some level of debate depending on your faith and beliefs.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
absolutely.
That's a pretty easy way to summarize it.
I don't disagree.
So I'll also back up and just go on record. While I have a specific faith that I have chosen to follow for various reasons, I am one of the few people who believe that all of the different major religions are explaining the same basic general thing, which is be a better person, do better for those around you, treat others in a positive fashion, no matter who they are.
So
none of them disagree there. They all have the same common baseline. Leave it at that, if nothing else.
You know, there's nothing wrong with that either. It's like there's nothing wrong with being a better person and treating and elevating those around you to be better with you. I loved once it was put, the only time you should ever be looking in your friend's bowl is to make sure that they have enough.
I've heard that somewhere.
It was C.K. Lewis, I think.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis, you mean?
No, C.K. Lewis, the comedian.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, the only reason you should be looking in your friend's bowl is to make sure that they have enough.
Yeah,
That
I think it
encompasses so much.
At some point, we're going to have to actually do a deeper dive on, I think, religious perspectives, because sure. I think it would be an interesting discussion. Just the way I phrase my outlook and philosophy, if you want to look it up, obviously I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to whoever wants to listen, but a form of Taoist Christianity is the best way to encapsulate the way I view things. It's not overly prevalent. The idea is that I have been, long indoctrinated into the beliefs and teachings of Christianity in general. I agree with many of them. I do have problems with many of them. The way I've reconciled those problems is that I don't necessarily know for sure what this other higher power is. I ascribe it to the Trinity defined in Christianity. I don't care if I'm right or wrong. And as a result, I don't have strong opinions and ties to what that actually means. I just believe that there are too many things that are not easily described to not believe that there's some level of intervention of a nature that we can't describe and explain and understand.
So, if you accept the idea that there are parallel universes, there is a universe where the Christian Protestant Bible is 100% true and accurate and literal. But there's also a universe that has no parallel universes, and I don't know what to do with that paradox.
Yeah, there are a lot of things like that it's fascinating because as a person who understands science, there are a lot of things that are difficult to reconcile. For example, just thinking about traditional Christian teachings, it's always talking about how God loves all of his children, etc., and will continually search them out, and there's no need to demonstrate power in order to prove faith, right? That's kind of in a nutshell the general teaching. But there are many stories throughout the Bible where in order to prove omnipotence or power, there have been demonstrations of that power. So if demonstrations are not required for faith, why are demonstrations illustrated in the text for faith? It's paradoxical in and of itself.
Yeah.
But that's also a digression. Just wanted to put it on record that we probably ought to plan on that for an actual full show topic.
Yeah, I was just going to say we are so far off the rails right now.
Yeah, let me wrap up real quick with the other couple of micro topics.
Yeah.
So there were two other things that I put in. One, Alabama man dies after being turned away from 43 hospitals as COVID rocks ICUs. Honestly, get vaccinated.
Yeah, I think you need to talk about the other sub-points there.
Get vaccinated.
Go ahead and mention the other two.
Yeah, and get vaccinated. I put it in there 3 times. Get vaccinated. Seriously, you're screwing up people's ability to get needed medical care because of a decision not to get a vaccine. I no longer have empathy for you. If you choose not to get vaccinated and you contract COVID and you have had conversations with your doctor who has also encouraged you to get vaccinated and you still have chosen not to, honestly, fuck you. That's it. Now,
don't mince your words, please.
Yeah. If you have chosen not to get vaccinated and you have had conversations with your doctor who has also said, you know what, with your specific case, I really am kind of hesitant. Let's see what other things we can do. I'm perfectly fine with that. 100% on board. That would be a scenario where, okay, maybe you hold off on getting the vaccine. Any other scenario under the sun, fuck you. If you are eligible to get the vaccine for COVID-19 and you do not have the specific guidance of a medical professional, specifically your primary care physician that you have a rapport and relationship with, urging you otherwise, and you have still not chosen to get vaccinated, I can't say fuck you enough. But anyway, that's the mean part of the show. The other thing, real quick, I find it ironic, and this goes back to the whole, I can't wrap my head around the stupidity that we're seeing. Though there are many cases of people who have elected not to receive the vaccine because they viewed it as experimental or rushed or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that are yet demanding and receiving monoclonal antibody treatment for COVID infections, which is a treatment that is more experimental and less understood than the vaccines. You people are stupid.
I believe they're called sheeple.
No. That's too positive a term for them. Like at this point, they've used that term for those of us who have actually cared enough to get vaccinated and pay attention to wearing a mask. No, they're stupid.
It's also not fair to the sheep.
Very much not fair to the sheep. But that goes real quick through the rest of the little micro topics.
Yeah, I wanted to interject here. It's like, okay, if you choose, okay, you think the vaccine is experimental. Okay, you think it's too experimental. As soon as you decide not to take the vaccine, you are now part of the experiment as the control. If you don't know what a control is, please go look up the scientific method.
Oh, the people you'd be talking to have no idea what a control group is.
I know. But you're anyone at this point, anyone who is not vaccinated is now part of the control group, which is part of the experimental process. Should we take a moment to explain like why the vaccine is less experimental, why it was not rushed, and why the monoclonal antibody treatment is?
Probably so. Let's at least do it justice. So I'll start off with research into vaccination technology, specifically the RNA-styled vaccines, started years ago.
And
the earliest recorded date I remember seeing was 2012.
I saw some the earliest data I saw for mRNA vaccines deliver mRNA was 1989.
Yeah, that sounds more reasonable. Because I did not do a deep dive looking for it. I've seen multiple references to early 2010-ish era. 2012 is what sticks out in my head. I mean, that alone is almost a decade of trying to understand that specific technology. And you know full well we don't hear about a lot of those things until they've spent years in a research capacity trying to understand it enough to even publish that data.
Right. I think the earliest publication came out in 1989 in a peer-reviewed journal article. So it's not anything that you or I or other lay folks are reading on a regular basis, if at all.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I haven't looked at very many peer-reviewed journals since 2014, 15.
Yeah, I was going to say I only ever did it because it was part of my job. So,
I finished my master's in 2012, and I kept a couple of subscriptions after that for a couple of years just to kind of have a feel for what was changing. But that's it.
Yeah. So the vaccine wasn't rushed because simply you have 3 different phases of testing and trials. You have phase 1 to make sure that it's safe. That went by. It's a normally pretty quick process to begin with anyway. Phase 2 was, we don't necessarily say it was skipped, but there was no specific phase 2 because phase 2 is it worth doing? As in, is it monetarily worth, going to the extent of doing a phase 3 trial? So phase 2 and phase 3 were the same phase because at this for this particular vaccine, it didn't matter how much it cost. We were gonna make sure that it's gonna work. So I can remember a little more than a year ago, there were something like over 40 candidates that were in phase 1. And I don't know how many made it out of phase 1. Not nearly as many. But phase 2, 3 went by really fast because we have so many people getting sick with this disease. So we were not, where some some drugs, some vaccines take years to go through the phase 3 trial. It's because there aren't enough sick people to make it happen as long. We had so many people working on it, so many people that were sick, so many people that we could do a complete and thorough phase 3 that we were able to get through that part of the trial in about a year, less than a year, which is amazing, totally amazing. But it was nothing rushed. Everything was done correctly. That's why they were able to get an they skipped the full, or they got the emergency use of the vaccine because people were getting sick and dying, because the remainder of the full FDA approval had to do with like clerical things, like the name of the drug, what's going to go on the label, what's going to go in the instructions and the packaging and so forth. That's what the rest of the full FDA approval was.
Yeah, let's also emphasize the emergency use order, or emergency use authorization is a better phrase, came after many clinical trials to prove effectiveness and safety. And none of that process is any different than any other vaccine.
Right. It just happened to be
different. Yeah, what was different was that it was authorized for emergency use because of the situation and because of not wanting to wait that much longer for the bureaucratic aspects of getting it fully FDA approved.
Right. The paperwork. There was no need to wait on the paperwork to start using it.
Right.
The efficacy and the safety of it was determined. So that's why we got an emergency use authorization. So should we go there and pivot into this main topic, because it comes from a peer-reviewed journal article.
Well, real quick, the monoclonal.
Oh yes, the monoclonal antibody.
The antibody treatment. That's pretty much been discovered like during the course of understanding the pandemic.
Right.
So if you think about timelines of investigation into mRNA technology and delivery of the vaccine, you've had many years of understanding going into that delivery. You've had maybe a year and a half on the antibodies, if you're being generous.
Yeah, but the other thing is it's not nearly as effective. What you're doing is...
No, it's a crapshoot. It's basically a desperate plea of, we know this works some of the time.
It's a Hail Mary full of grace. It's
the equivalent of praying for healing. It was my turn to interject.
It was pretty close to that. And the other thing is, I expect that there are higher likelihoods of it's a greater danger. You're taking I guess it's delivered through plasma. I don't know. It's a serial. You're taking antibodies out of a sick person.
Yeah, I think it's basically the equivalent of a transfusion, isn't it?
At some degree, I want to say it's in plasma. So I'll just say you're taking body fluid out of a person who is sick with SARS-CoV-2, that's COVID-19, and hoping that the body fluid that you take out of their body has antibodies that will be recognized by your immune system and fight off the virus. That exposes you to so many other things. Not just infection, but like, what if your donor is HIV positive? I assume they test for that. I don't know.
We can assume they test for a lot of things, but at this point,
yeah.
When you have the hospital system overrun and you have a shortage of supply of the antibodies anyway, like it's a crapshoot.
Yeah, it doesn't even, you don't even know if it works. And in many cases it hasn't worked. It's just, a roll of the dice. We don't understand it well enough. That's why it's so experimental. That's why it's more experimental. Like we know how the vaccine works. We know what to expect from the vaccine, and it's still working the way we expect it to work. So, yeah,
get the fucking vaccine. Period. Like seriously, at this point, if you are listening to us, which I don't know how many people may or may not ever actually listen, but if you're listening to us and you're not vaccinated, like seriously, fuck you.
So, where did the virus come from?
I think I've met my quota of fucks for the night.
No, there's.
I'm normally not so.
I know.
Plain spoken.
I know, but this is a.
We're well beyond the point of trying to be nice and rational. Like honestly, at this point, if you're going to continue to not get the vaccine because of a political talking point or some misguided opinion or belief, honestly, just go away.
If you can't do the right thing, do you deserve to be free?
No. Unequivocally, no.
There you go.
All right. So lab leak hypothesis. We've
so
we've talked around micro topics long enough. We should at least get to the main topic.
So I thought about this. This one's kind of surprised me because I hadn't been paying too much attention to it because for various reasons, it's like there's only so much that I can take, and there's only so much that we're capable of. I have had to cull my social media friends. I've had to be careful with what I'm looking at just because these are tough times and there's only so much the psyche can take. But I saw this thing and I thought it was really great. And it says, there's a legit reason you feel like absolute shit right now. You might be feeling a little over it. The psychological reason for this has something to do with surge capacity. Surge capacity is a collection of adaptive systems, mental and physical, that humans draw on for short-term survival in acutely stressful situations such as a natural disaster. The issue is that our surge capacity only allows us to adapt to major disasters if they're temporary. However, with the pandemic, the disaster stretches out indefinitely. The emergency phase has now become chronic. So because of this, on and on and on, your surge capacity is depleted and needs to be renewed. Things you can do to feel better, accept that life is different now. That's why I've gone to using the term in the before times. Expect less from yourself. Recognize the different aspects of grief. Look for activities new and old that continue to fulfill you. Focus on strengthening important relationships. Build regular practices into your life that promote resilience, such as better sleep, good nutrition, exercise, meditation, self-compassion, and saying no. But yeah, for various reasons, like I have purposely not looked at the news when maybe I would have otherwise. And so I came across this article about the COVID lab leak hypothesis. So back in May of 2020, there was a paper, and I don't know if it was one of those pre-reviewed releases of a paper, but it came out of Nature. It was either Nature. I take that back. It was either in Nature or Science. I have not been able to find the paper, but it basically said, for these reasons, looking at the genetic makeup of SARS-CoV-2, for these reasons, it's a naturally occurring virus, and that made sense to me. However, in June, not looking at the news this year, I missed this part where Biden had set up a requested that intelligence be gathered to determine whether or not this was a lab-made virus. And the result, he gave a 90-day window, find what you can find in the next 90 days and report back. And so this particular Nature article that has been republished in Scientific America and I think some other places, basically indicated that we don't know. We don't know if this was created in a lab or not. We don't know if this was something that was designed by people and leaked out purposely or accidentally. And it's not clear. However, the article in Nature is excellent at going through all the different scenarios of why this may or may not be a lab-created virus. Everything is it's inconclusive, but it points to it being a naturally occurring virus, and I found it very fascinating. And if you like thorough articles, it's a great article to read.
So I haven't read the article you linked, but I have followed this story over the past year-ish. I remember seeing it originally kind of at the early stages of 2020, and I haven't followed it with much zeal, but I've tried to at least understand the different kind of major talking points as we've progressed. And from everything that I've read, the general consensus is that it's somewhat coincidental that the specific mutations occurred, but it is not unnatural, which basically means that it could technically have been manipulated, but it could also have evolved naturally. And without finding concrete evidence of one or the other, we're never going to know because either one is perfectly plausible. Does that summarize it fairly adequately?
It does. They can't say conclusively either way. There's not enough evidence to rule out a lab leak or to prove that it's naturally occurring. There are leads to support the natural origin, that being in a bat, and there was a zoonotic spillover, but there's nothing that is definitive.
So the one thing that I do want to add in, and it's not specific to the general topic, I guess, but one thing to remember when looking at these types of explorations, a lab is typically set up to study a type of virus, in this case, the SARS virus itself, in an area where it is prevalent. So SARS is prevalent in wildlife in China, which is why a lab would be set up in China to study the SARS virus. Similarly, Ebola was studied most closely in Africa because of its prevalence in Africa.
Exactly.
This is not unnatural. It's not a basis for trying to say that because it's in a specific location, it is a higher likelihood of anything at all. It's just proximity to naturally occurring instances of a virus tends to be what drives the location of labs dedicated to examining said virus.
Right. Yeah, it's not coincidental, it's purposeful.
Yes.
You should go study the virus where it naturally occurs. That's the best place to start. So it's purposeful, not coincidental, not indicative of the lab leak. There has never been a recorded instance where a lab leak has caused a worldwide pandemic, but the first SARS outbreak was caused from a lab leak. I think 2 researchers got infected, and they stopped the spread. I think it spread to 7 others, but that's where it stopped. The outbreak was contained.
Yeah, it's not to say that it's impossible. It's just a reminder that coincidence and causation are 2 different things. Does that make sense, or do I need to explain?
Say it again.
Coincidence and causation are 2 different things.
Oh, yeah. I believe there's an excellent website called Spurious Correlations. It just shows like how just because something correlates well doesn't mean it's caused by that. I think one of my favorites was like the number of divorces in New Hampshire correlates really well with how many people die from bedsheet intangulations. I mean, right?
Yeah.
So,
in fairness, it's normally referred to as correlation and causation are not the same thing. But, coincidence, correlation, causation, all of them are different things.
Correlation does not mean causation. Or correlation does not indicate causation.
Right. I don't really have anything else on the lab leak.
Neither do I. It was I don't have anything either. Like I can't explain more than what was interesting in the what the article does. It's a fantastic article. I love articles like this. And it was just a show of micro topics that were sort of cohesive.
Yeah. I'll make sure I include links to that article at least in the show notes. I might go ahead and include all the articles we've referenced.
I think we should include all the articles. Or maybe
probably will.
Yeah.
I what I really want to do is I just want to have a summary statement I want to end with before we go into the after show. If you are not vaccinated and you do not have the guidance of your primary care physician for that choice in not being vaccinated, fuck you.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.